Hello and welcome to Newscentre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The US government has imposed fresh sanctions targeting Russia's two biggest oil companies. This has been done in an effort to pressurize Moscow to negotiate a peace deal with Ukraine. One of the two companies include Rosneft, which owns 49.13% stake in India-based Nayara Energy. Meanwhile, the European Union has also approved the 19th package of sanctions on Russia. This will also include a ban on the imports of Russian liquefied natural gas. The Russian government has reacted to these sanctions, saying that any action by the EU to confiscate Russian assets will result in a painful response from Russia. The Russian Foreign Ministry added that the EU has no legal means to seize Russian assets, so their confiscation would be theft. This move comes after US President Donald Trump shelved a proposed summit with President Putin and White House hardening its stance against the Kremlin. Things have escalated on the battlefield in Ukraine, with Russia launching a barrage of drone attacks and conducting nuclear drills as well. After a call with Prime Minister Modi on Diwali, President Trump also reiterated that India will not be buying much oil from Russia. In fact, he went a step further and said India's oil imports from Russia will be almost nothing by the end of this year.
India, as you know, has told me they are stop. You know, it's a process. You can't just stop it. But by the end of the year, they'll be down to almost nothing. That's a big thing. That was almost 40% of the oil. India, they've been great. Spoke to Prime Minister Modi yesterday. They've been absolutely great.
Meanwhile, the trade negotiations between India and US could take longer to reach a landing zone. The widely speculated meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi will not happen on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia next week. The US sanctions on Russian oil companies could also complicate matters. We're now joined by Ambassador D.P. Srivastava, who served as a senior advisor to ONGC Videsh and as an independent director at GAIL. Currently, he's a distinguished fellow at the Vivekananda International Foundation. Sumit Ritolia, lead research analyst of refining, supply and modelling at Kpler. Sumit, could you give us a sense of what's going to be the direct impact of these sanctions on these two Russian oil companies on India? How much have they exported to India, just these two companies, in the last 1 year?
Okay, hi, Parikshit. So actually, I think this is one of the hardest sanctions, or I would say hit on Russian exports to India, or I would say India's import of Russian oil till now. And if you look at like this year, India has been buying around 1.7 million barrels per day of total Russian barrel. Out of this, around 1.2 million barrels per day of crude is coming from Lukoil and Rosneft, the two sanctioned entities. So no doubt we see this is one of the major roadblock for the Indian refineries this year, and we still are evaluating. And what a prima facie it looks like, yeah, we will be seeing a little near-term impact on India's import of Russian oil. There's no doubt, because again, like what we believe is that, and as per our understanding and sources, OMCs, they're not buying directly from Rosneft and Lukoil at that scale, but they do have been buying through third parties and intermediaries. But whereas Nayara, that is owned by Rosneft only, and Reliance, that has a term deal, I think a 10-year term deal, if I'm not wrong, with Reliance, with Rosneft. So they have been buying mostly through Rosneft, along with some spot volumes. So it's more pressure on the refineries that are dealing directly with Rosneft. So we expect a near-term volatile situation for India's import of Russian barrels.
Right. Could you once again give us a sense? The latest analysis from Kpler says that India's import of Russian crude was around 1.8 million barrels per day. How much of that is coming from Rosneft and how much from Lukoil, you said?
So it was so on a year basis till date, 23rd October, it is around 1.75 million barrels per day. And out of that, around 900 is from Lukoil, and 900 is from Rosneft, and around 300 is from Lukoil. So around 1,200 KBD is from the two sanctioned entities.
All right. Thank you very much for that. Stay with us, Sumit. Let me also get in Ambassador D.P. Srivastava at this point. Ambassador D.P. Srivastava, why do you think the US has done this? Is this specifically aimed at India?
Well, the US has done this, as President Trump made it very clear, because of his disappointment that Russia has not come along or accepted whatever terms US is suggesting for ending the Russia-Ukraine war. Whether it is directly aimed at India, it's difficult to say at this stage. We have to be careful. A reading of the US Treasury Department's statement mentions that this will result in blocking assets of these two companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, in the United States. It adds that it also prohibits all transactions by US persons or within the United or within or transiting the United States that involve any property or interest in property of blocked persons. Now, my understanding is this does not necessarily involve sanctions against third countries dealing with Russia or these two countries, as long as those transactions are not within the US or do not go through the US, which essentially means that if they are not going through a payment channel, which is located or controlled by US, these sanctions will still not apply. So these are distinct from what is understood as secondary sanctions, which apply also to third countries dealing with designated entities. So as of now, I think this still leaves open scope for foreign companies who are doing, purchasing oil from Russia.
Right. Ambassador Srivastava, now, when it comes to India now changing its stand, so far we have maintained that we are buying Russian oil, and as Sumit also pointed out, our imports have actually increased in the month of October over September by about 250,000 barrels per day. It's now around 1.7 million barrels per day. 34% of our oil imports are coming from Russia. But after these sanctions, do you think India will have to be more careful?
Well, yes. In any case, it's a good policy to diversify our source of oil imports. So, to depend on Russia for 30 or 34%, or depend on any single source for such a major supply is something which needs a review.
Absolutely. And Sumit, how difficult will it be for Indian refiners, OMCs, to change their supplies? And how long would it take for these sanctions to kick in? According to you, do they come into effect immediately? And when it comes to diversification, what will be the cost increase? Because as you've pointed out earlier, the current discounts that Russia is offering are very, very compelling compared to the global peers. So what will be the cost increase that we could be possibly looking at if we had to buy from other sources?
Okay, so coming to OMC's point, I think OMCs are not that export as compared to what private refiners are, because if you see around total 1.7, whatever India has imported this year, around 6 to 700 has been to OMCs only. So in my opinion, OMCs are a lot diversified, and they have a good trading network in terms of like if they want to shun Russian barrels, or we see that day that, it is becoming increasingly difficult even to source cargoes from third party. That I see that might not be, because they have OMCs particularly have been buying lots of Russian barrels in spot and from third party. So and they have a lot of source, like as I pointed last day also, like you have Middle East with more supply coming up, you have Nigeria. Apart from that, you have LATAM in Brazil, Guyana. So in terms of crude availability, there is not much pain in terms of if Indian refiners, particularly OMC, wants to diversify. But the point is, why would they will? And like if they're not, like again, like if they're able to circumvent this US sanctions and buy from third party, then it's a good deal for them. Like if Indian government doesn't come up with a statement that or official policy that we are not going to buy from Russia, then that is a different case. But if they're not coming up like that, then the status quo maintained, like if they're able to circumvent this Rosneft and Lukoil. In terms of
final question to
yeah.
I'll just put the final question to DP Srivastava as we're running out of time, Sumit. Ambassador Srivastava, now, do you feel all of this is delaying the India-US trade deal as well? There was a lot of speculation. The Indian government was also, in a way, preparing for a visit of the Prime Minister to ASEAN, to the ASEAN summit on Kuala Lumpur, where there could have been an in-person meeting between the two leaders. There was a lot of speculation about this, not formally announced. But do you think that this is probably the sanctions and the standoff on Russian oil is one of the reasons why the trade deal is getting delayed?
I won't be able to comment on that because I'm not quite aware of the dynamics of the negotiations which are going on between the two countries. But additional sanctions always makes the situation a little more terse, and it's easier to strike a deal in a more relaxed atmosphere.
All right, Ambassador DP Srivastava, thank you very much for joining us, and thanks, Sumit, for that perspective as well. We're taking a break, but coming up, the government amends the IT rules to limit powers to take down online content to fear officials. My colleague Ashwin Kumar will be joined by Advocate Apar Gupta, Senior Advocate Sajan Puvaya, and Rohit Kumar, founding partner of the Quantum Hub, on the other side.